Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to Lost in the Wasteland, my weekly interview show where I learn a little bit more about somebody else's perspective on movies. And I'm joined by special guest, filmmaker Dalton Burdette. Thank you so much for coming on today.
And thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I got a chance to check out your new short film, Quiver, which I'm going to let you chat a little bit about and tell the listeners what your film's about.
Thank you. Yeah, Quiver is a little thriller horror short film that is about 30 minutes long, and it's kind of the story of this relationship between two brothers and the breakdown of that relationship and how they go about trying to rekindle it. But there's kind of a supernatural twist that's going on behind the scenes. I don't want to spoil anything, but it kind of stemmed from if you're going to make that's a horror thriller type project, then you should really ask yourself, what do you find scary? And something that keeps me up at night is what if I said something to a family member that I regretted and it was like, and I didn't get a chance to, tell them sorry or tell them that that's not how I meant that. And so being able to kind of explore that through the lens of a horror film was something I was really interested in doing. And, of course, I couldn't help myself but try to make it weird. But, you do what you can. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's currently in a festival run right now. I'm hoping to have it out on streaming sometime in the early summer. And yeah, I apologize in advance if you can hear my crazy dog chewing on a snack next to me.
It's all good. I have three cats in my house, and luckily they're all outside my office. But no, so I appreciate you chatting a little bit about your film. And as somebody who I have a brother, and you go through times where you might not be having the best relationship. I think this film hit a specific chord, and I think that's one of the great things about genre filmmaking is obviously there's the horror elements to it, but also finding ways to incorporate something meaningful and relatable into it. Because yes, I would agree after getting a chance to watch, there's definitely some weird stuff that happens in this film, and also something you do not want to get that spoiled because honestly, sitting and watching this film, it really took me by surprise. So it was very effective in that. And I really felt that relationship between those two brothers. So I can definitely feel that. Were there any other kinds of like influences, maybe like film wise or anything that you're kind of pulling upon with the film?
For sure. There's one specific film that's a very obvious inspiration when you see the film, but I can't say what it is because of how it
Fair.
ends. But you know exactly the film I'm talking about just when I reference that.
Yeah.
There's also just several different types of stories it's inspired by. Like obviously, there's like a most dangerous game element to
Yep.
it. There's a very cabin in the woods feel, not like the movie
Mhm.
Cabin in the Woods, but just that
Yes.
type of genre. And being able to have access to an actual cabin in the woods that was owned by a friend of mine was nice
Nice.
because that location would have been a nightmare to try to secure otherwise. And
Mhm.
just kind of being able to it's a very micro budget short film, so it's always fun to kind of rally the troops and just like, let's get together and let's just try to make this thing and see how it goes. And as the director, I sometimes will watch it and look at some things and be like, oh man, like if I just had like a couple more dollars, I could have like
Yeah.
nailed that one thing a little better. I could have done this, but at the end of the day, I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of everyone who worked on it, and they worked such long hours to help me get it done, and and power to them. I have the best crew. I'm really lucky.
Well, and it's certainly filmmaking takes a village. And especially when you're working on a film like this, it's great to have people that you can count on, especially when you don't have those extra couple of dollars. And to be honest, watching the film, I think you make a lot out of a little in terms
Well,
of like
thank
the
you.
budget and everything. So it was definitely a very moving and impactful experience. And certainly I picked up on some of those influences. Most dangerous game is very classic and timeless kind of story to play on. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's nice to know a person, to be able to get a access to a cabin to really get that vibe right. So
Oh yeah.
definitely. So hopefully you all, once this hits streaming around the summer, go check it out. Or if you're lucky enough and you're around some of these festivals where the film's releasing, go check it out and take advantage of getting to check out Dalton's film Quiver. But now, Dalton, are you ready to hop into some questions so we can learn a little bit about your perspective on movies?
Oh, yes, I'm so ready. I'm so excited.
Always love to start with the most frustrating one that everybody loves to be asked being a movie fan. But what's your favorite film?
Ah, yes, that's always the really just it's a beautiful question, but it's also like
Yes.
such a, you know, throughout my life that answer has changed. But the movie that I keep going back to, and this is a very basic like film school answer, and it's
Mhm.
not like a and it's not out of like a an idea that was presented to me. It was just seeing this movie at a really young age, and it just at different points in my life always coming back to me. And now I watch it every year on my birthday, and that movie
Nice.
is Jaws, the original Steven Spielberg Jaws. And part of the reasons why I love that film is not only is it like expertly crafted for someone's second feature film, which is just unbelievable, but
Yes.
it's every genre in one movie, and it's perfectly blended to where one genre doesn't affect the other. Like when it goes from being a horror film to an adventure film, you feel that that was the only way the movie could have gone. Like that's
Yep.
the natural progression, and like that is so hard to do. Like a tonal shift, sprinkle in comedy, sprinkle in some action, like the way that it's helmed and the way that it tells its story through not only exceptional visual storytelling but also just amazing crowd cheering beats. Like it's
Mhm.
there's nothing else like it. Like it's the original blockbuster for a reason,
Yeah.
and I just love it.
I think Jaws has gotten to the point where people kind of take for granted that this is such an iconic film. Of course, it's an iconic film, but one, you have a filmmaker who makes so much out of limitations. Because,
Yes.
having to wrestle a giant metal shark and trying to get that to work, obviously, in the end, did the film some favors unexpectedly. But I appreciate you bringing up the tonal shifts because there's a lot of good human drama in this film. You really
Mm-hmm.
care about Sheriff Brody. You feel connected to these characters. And even listening to the score for the film, you get those moments of like obviously the iconic theme, but also John Williams finds those like adventurous on the high seas kind of moments,
Yes.
and you really feel that. And that was something that really stood out to me the most recent time that I watched it. But it's a classic. So
Oh yeah.
no one can blame you for having Jaws up at number one. Now, Dalton, what's your earliest memory of going to the movies?
Ooh, okay. So I have two, and they were probably like 6 or 7 months apart. But
Mhm.
when you're that young, it's all five
Yeah,
minutes. The
yeah,
first movie I ever saw in a theater was The Emperor's New Groove, and
nice.
I remember going to see it. I went with my mom, and it's somewhere behind my mess of an office. I have the ticket stub for it still,
Mm.
but it's like that movie is like it's so good. Like
Mhm.
people when they think about like the Disney movies, I think it's a Disney movie.
Yeah.
They don't really bring that one up. And like sure, maybe it's not as good as some of the other ones they've done, but like there's a lot of humor. Kronk is
Mm.
iconic. And it's just,
Yes,
like that
100%.
was as a kid in the movie theater, it gave me everything that I needed. I found out way too late in life that that was David Spade doing the voice, and that blew my mind. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that till I was like 16. I was like, oh my god. But yeah, and then months later, I saw the Jimmy Neutron movie in theaters,
Nice.
and that because there are some people who didn't even realize it was a movie before a show, and like I
Mhm.
vividly remember seeing the movie in theaters as a kid. I think I also went with my mom. Like just so it's a ridiculous movie, but it was as a
Yes.
kid it was so much fun.
Thinking of Emperor's New Groove, it's so easy to think about like the Disney Renaissance from like 89 with Little Mermaid, probably through Tarzan. I feel like most people consider that.
Yeah,
And then there's that stretch of time up until, when like Frozen and Wreck-It Ralph came out that a lot of people weren't too big on Disney animated films, but between Emperor's New Groove and Lilo and Stitch, there's some really good ones in there. And I love Emperor's New Groove. And yes, Kronk is iconic, and Patrick Warburton is an absolute gem. And
yes.
between David Spade and John Goodman, it's just such a fun film. Even had some Tom Jones in there.
Mm.
It's like throw some Tom Jones in a random kids movie. And then the Jimmy Neutron movie was one of my first DVDs, and I still
Oh,
have
no
that
way.
because I was a huge Jimmy Neutron fan watching that show, and
Hmm.
that movie is so wild. And the fact that they got Patrick Stewart
I
and Martin
know.
Short to agree to be in that
It's
movie,
it's insane. It's insane.
and
Like Sheen was a formative character. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, go
Sheen was
ahead.
a formative character of like I think it's in the movie when they're doing a montage and he's just like, I'm peeing in the shower. And then it
Yes,
does more of the montage and it goes back and he's like, I'm
still
still doing
doing
it.
it.
It's like that was so funny as a kid.
It's such a silly kid thing to do if you have complete control of whatever you can do because your parents are gone.
Yeah.
Um, that was definitely like a formative show for me, for sure. And it was nominated for the first ever Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, which is wild.
Yeah.
And had some big competition because Shrek 1 and Monsters Inc. were nominated too.
I know. That's a
Uh,
crazy year. That's a crazy year.
and I distinctly remember watching the Oscars and seeing them animate them into seats during the ceremony. I kind of miss that. I think that's a fun thing. I don't know if they have the budget for it. Maybe that's
Yeah.
why they don't do it anymore. But shifting gears into a couple other favorite questions. But Dalton, do you have a particular favorite genre of movies?
That's honestly tougher than the favorite movie question because like
Mhm.
the answer is like yeah, like if I'm turning on a movie where I'm bored after
Mhm.
work, like I tend to go towards action films or horror films.
Yeah.
But when you ask me like, "Oh, what are some of your favorite movies this year?" Like I have a drama, I have a comedy. You know, I really and I'm not doing this as a cop out answer, I promise you.
No.
I love all genres, and
Mhm.
I think, and it's almost kind of like that. I feel the same way with music as well,
Mhm.
where if you open yourself up to different genres or things maybe you don't think you would like the best movie going experiences for me is when I'm kind of dragged and I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch this, and then the movie's really good, and you're like, wow, like I would have never, my closed mindedness would have never like watch this if I wasn't like dragged here. And then it really like opens you up to, something I like to tell people, particularly people who don't watch horror movies, is I say you're cutting yourself off to so many great stories. Like,
Mhm.
and what you brought up earlier in the conversation of genre filmmaking being used to like deliver very thematic things, it's so real, and especially through the horror genre. And,
Yeah.
so I encourage everyone to look at genres outside their comfort zone because you can really find some special stuff.
Well, and I think I appreciate your perspective on that. And no, I don't feel like it's a cop out answer to say if you open yourself up to any genre of film, you're going to find great films. Obviously, we
Mhm.
all have certain ones that we gravitate towards. I'm a big baby, so I get scared very easily. So, like,
Fair.
horror was never my thing growing up. It's so funny because my mom's like, now I look at you and you're posting all these things, watching all these horror movies. And there's different types of horror films to enjoy. I tend to not be the kind of person that just loves like crazy over the top
Right.
campy horror stuff.
Hmm.
But when I find like a horror film that's like really well crafted and hits something very impactful, and like, I can watch something like The Shining or The Thing, and there's just that
Yes.
paranoia and tension that just keeps building up and building up. Or, basically any A24 horror film is some kind of metaphor for something.
Yeah.
And then they just shake you to the core because they're absolutely terrifying. But especially something like horror, the great films are the ones that really explore something deep and impactful, and then that just makes it that much more scary.
Yes.
Just my experience, I know with Hereditary, it's like that
Hmm.
emotionally drains you for two-thirds of the movie. And then Ari Aster's like, well, are you ready now? I'm like,
Hmm.
no.
Yeah.
And then the
And,
third act of that film happens.
and you get some of the most terrifying images you've ever seen in your whole letter, like engraved in your brain still.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. Yeah. I'm thinking some of them. So there you go. Now, thinking about behind the camera, who are some of your favorite filmmakers?
Ooh. Again, man, these questions. I
Yeah.
obviously like Wood Jaws being my favorite film. I love Spielberg, and part of
Yep.
that is and this also ties into my genre answer as well, and that I like exploring all genres and I like
Mhm.
going out of my comfort zone and watching, let's watch a 3 hour drama followed by a 90-minute musical, followed by an 80-minute comedy, followed by a 3 hour action film. And
Yeah.
everything I just said are films that Steven Spielberg has successfully made. And like there's not many other filmmakers that can do that at the consistency that he does. And he's made films that I don't like. When you've
Yeah.
made films as long as he has, it's going to happen. But, you know, like that West Side Story that he did just a few years ago was unbelievable. And like
Yeah.
even I, a big fan of his, didn't think the film was going to be that good. And I went in and was completely wrong. And
Yeah.
I also Christopher Nolan, who that's also a very common like film schooly answer, but at the same time, he's a filmmaker, in my opinion, and I know not everyone agrees with me, but in my opinion, I've yet to see a film of his that I didn't like. And I've seen all of them, even
Mhm.
following that film he did for
Yep.
IFC. And I've liked all the films he's made to different levels of degree, but he's one of those people where like I don't even need to know what the film's about. You just got to tell me he's making it, and I'm like, all right, I'm there. If I could buy tickets now, I would.
Mhm.
And you have Denis Villeneuve in that same regard. I
Yeah.
could keep going and going and going. There are filmmakers coming up now who are also really starting to like show how talented they are. Like Greta Gerwig has knocked it out of the park multiple
Yeah.
times, and it's just like I can't wait for her Narnia movie coming out, and I don't even like
Mhm.
Narnia. I
Yeah.
can't wait. I'm gonna go watch her movie because it's her. So yeah,
Yeah, especially what you said about Spielberg, because even some of his contemporaries and friends, um, Martin Scorsese is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time,
yes,
and there are still genres like he hasn't really touched. He has done more than I feel like ignorant takes will say. They're not all just gangster movies.
yeah. I saw
But
that going around on social media like in the last year, and I'm like,
yeah,
guys, come on, like just he's made more films than that.
yeah, but Spielberg's done it all, and that's what's crazy. And I remember when they announced West Side Story, I'm like, do you need to though?
Yeah.
And then it came out and it blew me away. And I'm just like, well, if you're gonna make it that great, and something as personal as like the Fablemans he's making at this point in
Mm,
his career really hit too. I'm a huge Nolan fan, and you can ask my wife if we're sitting in a theater and the word syncope pops up on a trailer, and I'm just like excited. I don't even need to watch
yep.
the rest of the trailer. I'm just like, it could literally just be syncope and a date. And I'm like, done. I'll
Yeah,
be
I'm
there.
there. Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly,
it has that
exactly.
impact.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
just one last thing on Spielberg before we move forward, and
Yeah.
this is the point I bring up all the time. It's like Schindler's List and Jurassic Park came out the same year. like,
Same year.
like how many other people do you know could successfully make both of those films at the level that they are? Like, no one.
And both of them are absolutely perfect in exactly what
Yes,
they're trying to do. And
yes.
1993 was a wild year.
Hmm.
Now, think about in front of the camera, who are some of your favorite actors or actresses?
Ooh. So my brain immediately went to younger actors who are working
Hmm.
now. I'm a huge fan of Anya Taylor-Joy. I think
Yeah.
she is an incredible actor. I've never seen her give a bad performance. Um, her and a movie of hers that gets overlooked a lot is a movie she did with Olivia Cooke called Thoroughbreds. And it's such a good movie, and they're both
It's so good.
so good. And she plays a character that's really against type of what she
Mhm.
normally plays, and she does it exceptionally well. Like she played that character so well. I think now again, I'm just going to young people right now, but like Timothy Chalamet is unbelievable. Um, people go over Beautiful Boy way too much, and like that's a devastating
Yeah,
performance, and like it was
absolutely.
unreal. Haley Steinfeld I think is amazing,
Mhm.
and she's also a great voice actor as well.
Yeah,
Which people learn that like those two, just because you're good at one, I mean, you're not necessarily good at the other. She's actually great at both. Going into some older people, like I've always been a big fan of Matt Damon, and
mm,
it's partially just because he is a very versatile actor, and he was able to do that early, where he would go from like, you know, Dogma to Talented Mr. Ripley to Jason Bourne, and
yeah,
him establishing that like really early, like really kind of set the stage for him to where now whenever he pops up, you're like, oh. like it's kind of like you see like every middle-aged dad like lean forward whenever Matt Damon shows up in a movie. And like, he has that effect. Denzel's always good. I don't
Yeah.
think he's ever been bad. Even in like I thought Gladiator 2 was fine. He was a great in it, like just every
He'll
time
for
he appears.
if that movie ever comes up, the first thing I think people are going to think of is Denzel Washington
Yeah.
because he was
Yeah.
just that electric in it.
Hmm.
But no, Anya Taylor-Joy's incredible, and I have my Thoroughbreds Blu-ray somewhere up there.
Nice.
That is such a great film, and even like that tortured, cursed, the New Mutants movie that took forever to actually
Listen,
come out. She
she
was
was good in
great.
it. She was. She
She was
was.
the most memorable and most definitely most had the most presence out of any of those young characters in that. And she makes the most out of anything. And if you look at Timothy Chalamet, all you need to look at is 2024, sandwiched between Paul Atreides and Bob Dylan, who
Yeah.
are completely different actors. And I'll even admit, I was not completely sold on him being cast in Dune because,
Hmm.
like, I'm like, well, I believe him to be this powerful figure standing in front of me. And then I watched Dune Part 2 and I'm like, he dropped a little bass in his voice, and then it's just like, oh wow, he actually can deliver on this. And
Yeah.
that's my fault for doubting him. And even like Matt Damon, he was one of the best parts of Oppenheimer. I loved just his presence in that film. And they gave him that nice F bomb. That he got to deliver in there.
Yeah.
And I think my Matt Damon's in the Odyssey, Nolan's next film.
Yes, I think he is.
One of the 50 people that got announced for that movie already. But
Yeah.
that's just a Nolan film at this point.
Hmm.
Um, Now shifting gears into a couple other kinds of questions. What's a film that you feel like you just literally watch every day?
That I could watch every day.
Yeah.
Step Brothers.
One of the
It's
most endlessly quotable comedies, period.
of all time, and like because it's the perfect movie for multiple reasons. Like it's a great laundry movie, and that if you
Yes.
have tasks to do, you can have Step Brothers on to where you can just like listen to it as you do something. But if you were to give it your full attention, it's still consistent and great. Like
Mm,
Adam McKay, you know, his films can be interesting. They can fall off sometimes. He doesn't get enough directorial credit for those early comedies he did.
yeah.
And Step Brothers is directed so well. And it's like never brought up. And I always try to champion like how well directed a movie that is. And like it's like if you give it your full attention, it's really great. And um Richard Jenkins in that movie is so good. And like
So good.
Adam Scott, that might be my favorite performance he's given. Like that's it because it's so against type. Like it's something you never see him do, and like you so believe he's just such a piece of garbage. Like
Yeah.
every time you watch it, yeah, I could watch that every day.
I feel like post Parks and Rec, he became so much like Ben that
Yeah,
people forget that that was how much of an a-hole he was in Step Brothers. And the amount of times I quote Step Brothers on a regular basis is just it's that funny. And yes, Richard Jenkins between I'm going to the cheesecake factory to get a drink, but it's Christmas Eve.
yeah,
Just that's one of the saddest things ever to
yeah.
be uttered out of a human being's mouth, but it's hilarious. And the whole thing is that my dad told me to stop being a
Being a
dinosaur.
dinosaur.
It's the dumbest gag you could possibly put in this movie, but they sold it. They sold it perfectly.
It's so good.
Catalina wine mixer. Uh, which I am a huge fan of the other guys. I feel like that's one that
Yes,
not enough people give enough credit to because
yes,
one, that was really where he started like laying seeds for like, is Adam McKay trying to say something here?
yeah, yeah.
And then
Like
I also quote that movie, An Insane Amount.
I cried laughing in the movie theater when they were having the whisper fight at the funeral. Like I was in tears. I was laughing so hard. And like the movie has several moments like that, but that for some reason, like when you said other guys, that was the first scene that came into my head. Like that is so funny. Michael Keaton's so good in that.
Michael Keaton coming roaring in with it's like in most intense face on, and just
Yeah, it's so
Michael
good.
Keaton's so good in that. And rest in peace, Ray Stevenson,
Mm,
because there's three things that I love in this world: Kylie Minogue, the dimples right above a woman's buttocks, and the look on a man's face when he knows I'm gonna hurt him. It's like those are random things, but it's so funny. So
yes.
now thinking about what's a film that connects to you closely because it's related to another interest of yours.
Okay, so a very influential filmmaker for me, as for a lot of people in the indie space, was
Mhm.
Kevin Smith.
Yep.
And one of his movies that's not that liked compared to most of his. I mean, it's more liked now than it was, but it was Mallrats. And
Yep.
I'm a very big I'm comic book guy, and I
Mhm.
collect if my collection was in the room, I'd be able to cover every wall. But like watching that movie, like when I first discovered his films and like finding that movie, and that like just watching that movie came out in, like the mid 90s, I'm like, man, if this
Mhm.
movie came out in like 2010, it would have been like such a monster hit, like from the popularity of comic books. But like the characters in that movie and the way they would go about their everyday lives, but somehow tie it back to like a stupid comic book thing, like when Brody meets Stan Lee, and Stan Lee
Mhm.
is trying to be like very profound with him, and all he keeps asking him is like, Mr. Fantastic, does every part of him stretch? And like for some reason I was just like that. Yeah, like that's kind of the people I would speak to, like at the comic book store. So that makes sense.
It's so funny because I know he's working on Mallrats too, which I feel like this is the perfect time to explore. But malls, though,
Yeah,
because like who goes to malls anymore?
yeah,
And
they're
that'll
dying.
be that'll be an interesting thing to explore. But no, like I feel like Jason Lee and Kevin Smith movies is just magic because he
Yes.
knows exactly what he's going for with that. And in every one of them, his character is one of the most memorable parts of the movie. But no, that scene with him and Stan Lee is so fantastic.
Hmm.
And I'm a Jersey boy, so we do
Okay.
love some Kevin Smith here, which is so
Hmm.
funny when it just starts talking about like Jersey places, and I'm like, I know where that is. I've been,
Nice.
and because it's not exactly like New Jersey has the best reputation, generally, and also in movies. You
Yeah.
know, I remember, and this is so random, but I remember watching that movie Moonfall,
Okay.
where the moon's falling to the earth, and at the beginning of the movie, this astronaut has to move, and the little girl's like, to New Jersey. And I'm sitting there with my two friends. I'm just like, I'm automatically giving this movie a half a star because screw that for hating New Jersey. I didn't have to go much farther to not like the movie, to be honest.
Yeah.
But like,
Fair. Fair. Yeah.
it didn't start well. It's like those are fighting words. But
Yeah.
anyway, I digress. Now, Dalton, who's a film character you connect with on a personal level?
I don't mean to dip back into the Kevin Smith well, but like Randall from Clerks was like so, and it's mostly because like I discovered that movie like when I started working like at a grocery store,
Mm,
and like that movie just found me at like the perfect time in my life for it.
yeah.
And like every word out of Randall's mouth, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not a nice person. Like just
But
every word out of his mouth, like whether it be movie related or like the sequence when the customer like shows two movies and they're the same, and he's like, I hope you're happy, ma'am, you and your ruse, your cunning attempt to trick me. Like that was like just everything he did. I'm like, God, I wish I could talk to these people at the store like this. Like it was almost just like you were like living vicariously through him.
yes.
And it was just, yeah.
And that is why Randall is so great, is because anybody who has worked in any kind of retail job or service industry and has had to deal with customers, we all hope that we could be Randall to those customers sometime. But
Yep.
we're trying to be courteous and not get fired. And Randall doesn't care, so he just says it
Nope.
anyway. And like Jeff Anderson didn't have like the biggest acting career, but he's gonna live on for forever as Randall,
Oh
and we
yeah.
appreciate that about him
100%.
100%.
100%.
Clerk 2 probably is my favorite Kevin Smith movie.
That's my favorite
And,
Kevin Smith movie. I'm not even
and
joking.
he's endlessly hilarious in that. Just
Yep.
everything. And I'm a humongous Lord of the Rings fan, and I can take a step back and appreciate the walking joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Going back to crying of laughter in Clerks 2 when Elias tells him about pillow pants, like I was holding my stomach like I couldn't breathe just because Jeff Anderson's fate, like, because you
yeah,
can tell he wants to run and tell Dante right away. He's like, I have to get to the end of this sentence. Like, I have to figure out what's going on. It's so good.
that wild, the wild. And I have a couple more here. So, Dalton, what's a film that you love that you feel like would surprise people?
The Notebook rules. I
There
love
you
The
go.
Notebook. And like
Hmm.
when you see my setup and you see like, Superman, Psycho, I pointed at them the wrong way, but like,
Yeah.
comic books, lightsaber props, you don't think of rom-coms or romantic movies especially, but like The Notebook is good. And when you go back and look at it, like there was this stench on that movie for a while because it was just like, oh, it was the early 2000s,
Yeah.
you know, chick flick, quote unquote. And it's like that movie is profound. Like it's young Ryan Gosling and young Rachel McAdams, two of the best actors working today. And you get to see them be in a movie where they were like really trying to show what they had. And
Hmm.
their chemistry is so good. And just the journey of that film and what those characters go through. Like, it's a great movie. Like, I really like that movie. I've seen it like 4 times. And like every time I watch it, I find something new and I like about it. And and that's going back to my genre thing earlier. Like, I would have never watched it
Yeah.
unless someone said like you need to get out of your comfort zone and like watch other films. And like it's a great film.
That's one of my favorite things about like I if I can manage it, I don't say no to like if somebody offers up a screening link for something. It could be the most random movie ever. It's still a movie I get to watch, and you never know. It could be something that really blows you away. Sometimes you get an email like last January about hundreds of beavers months before everybody else realized about it. And I'm like,
Yep.
hundreds of beavers? This looks ridiculous. And then I was early on that train. I'm just like, everybody, I'm like, you need to watch this movie. So
The
absolutely.
Sherlock Holmes Beaver got a huge laugh out of me. Like, I mean, the movie's great, but like
Yeah.
just seeing that pop into frame, I was just like, I just like put my head down and I'm like, this is brilliant. Like, this is so brilliant.
I just
Oh,
received my Blu-ray from Vinegar Syndrome, one of like the
okay.
small indie um physical media retailers, and the booklet in it has all of those parody posters.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, yes. I feel
That's
like
so
I
cool.
shared almost every single one of them when it came up on my Instagram because I lost it every single time. But
Yeah,
this is why you should always just check out a movie. Go in, open
always.
mind. Now, my last question for you, Dalton, is what do you love most about movies?
Oh man, that is a great question. Um, there's so much to say, but I
Hmm.
think really what I love most about movies is it's kind of twofold. One, a lot of the times when people work in art, whether it be filmmaking or painting or whatever, a question that they face a lot of the time is like, is what you're doing important? And
Hmm.
meaning like, there are doctors, there are lawyers, there are people who actually go, there are nonprofits, people who actually go out and help people. And, you can struggle with that. I mean, I'm just a micro indie filmmaker, but, even when I'm at the age where a lot of my friends are getting married and having children, and it's like, I want to make this dumb movie and you start asking yourself like are these things important, like is this like something someone should do? And then I think about it, and every time I've lost somebody or every time I've gone through something, I immediately just turn to movies and it helps. Like just turning to art in a time of need is a very special emotional feeling. Like I have very deep connections to movies that I shouldn't have. Like, for example, I love the 2014 Need for Speed movie. And the reason
Nice.
I love that movie is because I saw it at a time where I was about to graduate high school and I was fighting with my mom a lot over like scholarships and all this stuff. And we were like just at each other's heads all the time. And one day I get pulled out of school during the middle of the day and I'm like, oh, someone died. Like, that's what that means. And it's my mom. And she's like, hey, we've been fighting a lot. I just wanted to take you out and let's go to the movies. And we saw Need for Speed. And like, I will always hold like Need for Speed, like in
Nice.
that special place, because like I just needed that movie at that time. And, you know, I, it's also a place where, we're in a very divisive time,
Yeah.
in America. And I can go into a movie with somebody who believes everything diametrically opposed to me, and we can sit down and watch and have the same communal experiential event of liking or disliking the same movie. And like that is a superpower that you don't get many other places. I could give you plethoras of reasons as to why
Yeah.
movies are important to me, but I think those two are like the main ones.
That's a great story too with the Need for Speed.
Mm-hmm.
And like what I'll just add to that because that was fantastic is I feel like it's what we take for granted because, imagine if people didn't make movies anymore
Mm,
and there just weren't any. What would life be like? And then we'd miss it and we'd feel like something's missing. And I think that's when people would appreciate just how impactful that can be.
yes.
So it's why we love movies. But Dalton, thank you so much for going through my questions. How I always like to wrap up my show is to have my guests ask me a question. So what would you like to ask the Wasteland reviewer?
Ooh, before I ask my question, I just want to say
Mhm.
I hugely admire your physical media collection.
Thank you.
It's lovely. I'm team physical media all the way. My question for you is, what was the movie that got you into wanting to be a part of like the film conversation and get into like the line of work that you're doing? Because usually, and it doesn't have to just be one movie. I know sometimes it's
Yeah.
like a collection, but like, what was the thing that kind of sparked that interest for you?
It's so funny because I just wrote an article for my website about this because I've been trying to figure out like different kinds of articles to write for it. And one of them's I call Outside the Wasteland. And it's I pick a film that means something to me in more than I just really like this film. And I wrote about the Road Warrior
Mm,
because I remember I think it was the summer between my freshman and sophomore year of college. And, I was back home, my grandparents' house, and we had Encore for like one of those free trials or something.
yeah.
And they had like action because like, had all the different genre ones. And
Hmm.
they had the Road Warrior on, and I just sat and watched it and was absolutely blown away. And I don't there's so many things about it. It's just like the world building, this crazy action. It was so thrilling. And if you people can't tell by the motif of literally all the things that I do, the Wasteland was heavily influenced on me. And it all
Of
really came
course.
down to that first time that I watched The Road Warrior. And it even influenced like I've dabbled in screenwriting and stuff like that. And I've written whole scripts that were extremely heavily like that seed was planted when I watched that.
Mm,
And I admire Dr. George Miller so much because he was an emergency room surgeon in Australia
yeah.
and just sees all these people coming in and be like, I have an idea and I'm going to make a movie for not that much money. And what it turned into, and Fury Road's one of my favorite films ever.
Hmm.
And that
It's
made me so
fantastic.
happy that Warner Brothers decided to give him $150 million to go make a completely, utterly bonkers movie. And it's just that film inspired me so much. And I feel like that was because like I took a cinema class in high school and that started that ball rolling. I joined Rider University Alternative Films Club when I was a freshman, which is
Okay.
all we watched independent foreign and classic films. But it was like The Road Warrior was like that last push that really got me into wanting to do something more with this than just I really like movies. So but there you
That's
go.
awesome. That's a beautiful answer. I like that. I like that.
Well, I appreciate your question, Dalton. And I appreciate your time. And thank you so much for coming on and chatting movies with me.
No, thank you, man. This was a pleasure. I love doing this. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And all of you out there, make sure to keep an eye out for Quiver, whether if you're getting a chance to check it out in some of the festivals or when it comes out on streaming. But most importantly, thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.